Hello again. Tonight's second, somewhat cheap science fiction movie review is of a 1959 slash 1962, because it was originally released in 59 and later in 62, and I'll explain that in a minute, is Battle Beyond the Sun, produced by Roger Corman, directed by uh, I got to get the names here right. The American version was directed by Nicholas Condon and Edmund Palmer, but the original version was directed by Soviet uh, people, and I can't never pronounce their names. But what Corman did, and he had a knack for this, is he took an old, obscure Soviet science fiction film and re-edited it and redubbed it so that the characters are now speaking English. He made some changes to the story and did some additional scenes. He had Jack Hill film those additional scenes and uh, changed the plot a little bit, but not too much. Essentially, to encapsulate in the Soviet version, it's about it's after a nuclear war, and the U.S. and the Soviets are attempting to put the first man on Mars. The Soviets have built a space station, and they're going to launch a rocket from the space station, which makes sense. It's a lot easier to launch a rocket from space than having to build it on Earth. You don't have to deal with gravity. But the U.S. spaceship, which is called the Typhoon, gets into trouble and calls the Soviet space station, asks for emergency permission to land, which they're granted, and they meet with the Soviet scientists, and they're friendly, and they learn that the Soviets are planning to launch their ship, Mars ship, which they call the Rodina, in like 24 hours. So they hastily make the repairs, and before the ship is really properly ready, they go ahead and take off for Mars because they don't want to be beaten to Mars by the Soviets. Well, that turns out to be a mistake, as their rockets are still damaged, and they're starting to be pulled in towards by the sun's gravity, and they can't escape because their rockets are damaged. So they end up having to call the Soviets for help. The Soviets launch the Rodina and rescue them, and the astronauts are saved. But now they've burnt up too much fuel in their attempts to escape the sun. They can't return to Earth, and they can't go to Mars. So their only hope is to land on an asteroid, which they call Ankor, and it's in orbit of Mars. And they land on the asteroid, but now they need a refueling rocket to come and bring them more fuel so they can go back to Earth. The refueling rocket is guided in by guidance antennas, but for some reason it crashes and explodes. And so now they're stuck. They don't know what to do. When they took off from the space station, they accidentally injured a cosmonaut called Somov. And Somov is now recovered and says, I have to go. I'm the only one who can. He's going to pilot a refueling ship and rescue them. And he does so because the refueling ships were not meant to carry humans. He is exposed to a deadly amount of radiation, and he gets there, saves the Americans, but he dies. And the Americans and the Soviets come back to Earth, and they're hailed as the Soviets are hailed as heroes, and that's the end of the Soviet version. The American version is somewhat different. They constructed a framing story in which, again, the nuclear war took place, but now there are two new nations. One is referred to as North Hemis, which is basically all the nations of the Northern Hemisphere, and the South Hemis, which is all the nations in the Southern Hemisphere. And they are also competing to have the space race to get to Mars. The plot is essentially the same up until the point where they land on the asteroid. In the added scenes, you see sort of a howling monster. At first, you just see kind of an outline. You don't quite see what it is. You see some jagged teeth that are vertical rather than horizontal, and an eye on a stalk, and that's basically all you see of this creature as it lurks behind a rock when the spacemen are landing on Ankor. Then when the second rocket, which arrives, and I think they renamed the guy from Somov to Dr. Grayson or something like that, and he lands, and it's the same actor, and is attacked by these two hideous creatures. One of the ones, the one that you just barely saw, the one that roared and had the vertical mouth, actually kind of looks like, and I think this is intentional on Corman's part, a vagina with teeth, and it has these lashing tentacles with claws on the ends of them. And the second monster, which it is attacking, is a barrel-shaped kind of creature which also has eyes on stalks, and it has sort of whip-like things that it's using to attack the other creature with, and it kind of looks like a walking asshole. Has like a hole at the top of it. How these creatures can breathe without any atmosphere is never explained. The men are wearing spacesuits, the creatures aren't, so I think they would have died from either radiation exposure from, because the radiation at Mars is much higher than on Earth, or lack of oxygen, unless they don't breathe oxygen. They don't explain that, and they attack the Somov character, and he is very badly wounded. His body's all torn up. So he's brought the rocket, but he dies, and then that allows the combined North Hemis and South Hemis astronauts to get back to Earth. And now there's a voiceover that says, the nation, even though the first attempt to land on Mars failed, it paved the way for future flights and cooperation between North and South Hemis. A couple of technical notes. The model work I thought was pretty good. The space station model is particularly convincing. Obviously, they used chroma key to put the astronauts in, but they're all wearing space suits and helmets, and gravity boots, which I thought was good attention to detail. But there are some science glitches. Both rockets spit flames in outer space, which we know is not possible because there's no oxygen in space, and there's some other science glitches that I noted, but like I said, like the scenes on the asteroid doesn't move, and things do not sit stationary in space. There would have been some rotation. Things don't just sit solitary like that. At least not small objects. Big objects like planets, yeah, but not small objects like asteroids. Made a few more notes here. The antenna aerials on Ankor look good. They rotate. They're interesting looking. They look realistic. There's a scene of a deep space tracking antenna, which again looks good. It looks realistic. The dubbing is particularly bad. The people's dialogue, which was redubbed into English, does not match their lip movements at a lot of points in the film, and you will notice it. Again, they even renamed the actors, like Alexander Shugov was renamed Andy Powell, and Andy Stewart, and another guy whose name I can't even begin to pronounce was renamed Ed Derry. That's not his real name. It's like Sergei Gromishka-Vetkov, some really long Russian name. The other actors in it are Kirk Barton, Arla Powell, Linda Barrett, Barry Chertok, and Mary Cannon, and they're in the added scenes. To produce the American version, or associate produce it, Corman hired a young man by the name of Francis Ford Coppola, and his wife, Carmine Coppola, created the American soundtrack for the film, the score. She did the score for the film. So the whole Coppola family, as it were at the time, he had not had his children yet, helped on this film, which just shows that Corman liked to give young directors and actors and producers a leg up, and he did it with Jim Cameron, and he did it with Francis Ford Coppola, and quite a lot of other upcoming actors, directors, George Romero, and lots of others. It's not bad. The spaceship models I thought were pretty good looking for the time, especially for 1959. The lighting is good. There's a contrast between red and blue, which I thought was interesting. The interiors of the spaceships are all blue lit. The series scenes on Mars and also on Ankor are red lit, but the asteroid itself is blue, so that's kind of an interesting contrast there, and the colors are good. The even though it's obviously made out of styrofoam, the scenes on Ankor do look fairly decent. It's really shot well. The cinematography is good. The editing, the sound and the lighting are decent. The ending was very corny, but that's to be expected from this kind of thing. Even the Soviet ending, which they left the Soviet ending in. It looks corny. The conquering heroes are welcomed home, and they were throwing bouquets of flowers at them, and women are coming up and kissing them and all that. Reminiscent of the cosmonaut era, I guess. It's worth watching, and those two really frightening monsters made a reappearance, albeit redesigned and better produced in Corman's Galaxy of Horrors, which I've never seen, but I understand is quite a bit more gory than this. I don't want to see a movie where Aaron Moran gets ripped in half by a tentacle. Sorry, that's a little too gross for me. But this one is interesting, and I think you'll enjoy it. It's silly, it's goofy, and like I said, the dubbing is really bad. The added scenes don't really add a whole heck of a lot to the plot. They could have left out the monsters and still had an interesting plot. But worth watching, Battle Beyond the Sun.